Picture this: midnight in a palace so cold your breath freezes midair. A woman screams behind velvet curtains thick enough to muffle murder. Somewhere in that room, a baby takes its first breath, but something's wrong, terribly wrong. The infant's twisted limbs, the sunken chest, the bluish tint of skin that shouldn't be that color. The royal physicians exchange glances sharp as daggers. Outside the chamber, an entire kingdom waits praise, celebrates a birth they haven't even seen yet. And right there, in that blood-soaked moment, someone makes a decision that'll echo through centuries. A decision to swap one life for another. To steal a peasant child and place a crown on its head while the true heir, deformed and doomed, vanishes into history's darkest corners. You think you know your history? Think again. Because what I'm about to tell you will shatter everything you thought you knew about royal bloodlines, divine right, and the fairy tales they fed us about kings and queens. This isn't some conspiracy theory cooked up in someone's basement. This is documented, whispered about in court records, hinted at in letters that survived the flames meant to destroy them. 6 times, at least 6 confirmed times, royal families played God with innocent lives, swapping babies like trading cards to protect their precious dynasties from the ugly truth. Their blood wasn't pure, it was poison. Let me take you back to a winter night in 1688 London. St. James's Palace. King James II and his wife Mary of Modena have been trying for years to produce a male heir. The pressure's crushing them. James is Catholic in a viciously Protestant England, and if he dies without a son, his Protestant daughters inherit everything, and the Catholic cause dies with him. Mary's had miscarriage after miscarriage, stillbirths that broke her, pregnancies that ended in tiny coffins. The whole country's watching, waiting, some hoping she fails. Then boom, she announces she's pregnant again. But here's where it gets weird. Really weird. Nobles who should have been allowed to witness the birth, a standard practice to verify legitimacy, are suddenly kept out. The room's packed with Catholics, James's people, but the traditional Protestant witnesses, nowhere to be found. And when that baby boy emerges, supposedly healthy and screaming, the rumors start immediately. They spread like wildfire through London streets, through the courts, through every tavern and marketplace. They're saying someone brought a baby into that birthing chamber in a warming pan. Yeah, you heard that right. A freaking warming pan. Those long-handled metal containers they used to warm beds with hot coals. The story goes that the real baby, James's actual son, either died during birth or was born so hideously deformed that showing him would have destroyed the monarchy. So someone, maybe a midwife, maybe a trusted servant, smuggled in a healthy peasant baby boy, probably bought from some desperate mother for a handful of coins, and swapped him right there while Mary lay exhausted and half-conscious. The warming pan baby, as history calls him, would grow up to be James Francis Edward Stuart, the old pretender, and his contested birth would literally spark a revolution. The glorious revolution of 1688, where Parliament decided enough was enough and invited William of Orange to invade. Yeah, invade. They invited a foreign army to take over because they couldn't stomach the idea that this baby might actually be legitimate. Or maybe they knew something the official records would never dare admit. That baby's questionable birth gave them the excuse they needed to overthrow a king. But here's the thing that'll really mess with your head. What if the conspiracy theorists were right? What if that warming pan wasn't just Protestant propaganda? Because when you dig into the Stuart family medical history, it's a horror show. Generations of intermarriage between cousins, uncles marrying nieces, the whole twisted family tree that looks more like a wreath. The genetic consequences were catastrophic. Stillbirths, infant mortality rates that make you weep, children born with bodies that couldn't sustain life. Jump forward to the French Revolution, and we've got another baby swap story that's even darker, even more tragic. Louis XVII, son of Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette. This poor kid never had a chance. Born into opulence, heir to the throne of France, and then the whole world exploded around him. The revolution devoured his parents, literally. Guillotine blades falling, crowds screaming for royal blood. Little Louis gets locked in temple prison, and here's where the story splinters into a dozen competing versions. The official record says he died there in 1795, aged 10, from tuberculosis. But dozens of people came forward over the years claiming to be the real Louis, saying they were smuggled out and some other dying child put in their place. And you know what's crazy? Some of those claims were pretty convincing. DNA testing centuries later has tried to settle it, but the questions remain. Why? Because the Bourbon family had the same problem as the Stuarts, toxic bloodlines. Look at the Habsburg jaw, that grotesque underbite that became their trademark, literally bred into them through generations of marrying their own relatives. Charles II of Spain, the last Habsburg king, was so inbred his DNA showed he was more inbred than if his parents had been siblings. The dude could barely eat, couldn't speak clearly, probably couldn't produce children. His tongue was too big for his mouth. His jaw jutted out so far he couldn't chew food properly. And he wasn't an anomaly. He was the inevitable conclusion of their breeding practices. So imagine you're a Habsburg royal in the 1600s, and your wife gives birth to a baby with deformities so severe the child can't possibly survive. Or worse, survives but is so visibly damaged that presenting them as the heir would invite invasion, rebellion, or civil war. What do? You're not just protecting your pride, you're protecting an empire, millions of subjects, political alliances that keep half of Europe from killing the other half. Medieval records, the ones that survived, hint at this happening way more than we'd like to admit. Court physicians kept secret journals. Midwives whispered deathbed confessions. And every now and then, some historian stumbles on a letter that casually mentions how convenient it was that the heir suddenly looked healthy after being sickly in the womb. Or how strange that twins were announced, but only one child ever appeared in public. The Romanovs, Russia's last imperial family, they've got their own twisted chapter in this story. Alexei, the Tsarevich, had hemophilia, that bleeding disorder that came from Queen Victoria's equally messed up family tree. The kid could die from a bruise. Alexandra, his mother, was desperate, absolutely frantic to keep him alive. She turned to Rasputin, that wild mystic who somehow could calm the boy's bleeding episodes. But rumors swirled through the Russian court that maybe, just maybe, there'd been attempts to swap Alexei with a healthy child. Attempts that failed, obviously, because Alexei's hemophilia was documented by doctors. But the fact that people even considered it shows how normalized this practice was in royal circles. Think about the logic here, the cold, ruthless calculation. You're born into royalty. You genuinely believe God chose your family to rule. Divine right, they called it. Your bloodline is sacred, more important than any individual life. So when that bloodline produces a defective heir, you're not just dealing with a personal tragedy, you're facing a cosmic crisis. The wrong heir could mean war, famine, invasion, the collapse of everything you've built. One deformed baby could cost thousands of lives in the wars that follow. So you make the swap. You find a peasant woman, someone who just gave birth, someone desperate enough or terrified enough to cooperate. Maybe you pay her, maybe you threaten her, maybe you just take her baby while she's sleeping and leave her with the royal defect, if you're feeling generous. Most likely you just kill her, tie up that loose end permanently. No witnesses, no claims, no one to contest the heir's legitimacy 20 years down the road. That healthy peasant baby gets scrubbed clean, wrapped in silk, presented to the court as the miracle heir. Everyone celebrates, cannons fire, bells ring across the kingdom. And somewhere in a forgotten room, a deformed infant disappears. Maybe smothered quickly to end its suffering. Maybe left to die slowly. Maybe, in rare cases, hidden away in some remote monastery or asylum, a shameful secret locked behind stone walls. The peasant mother whose child you stole. She wakes up to find her baby replaced with a dying, deformed infant, if she's lucky enough to wake up at all. What's she gonna do? March up to the palace and demand her child back? She'd be executed on the spot for even suggesting such an insane story. So she buries the royal defect, probably doesn't even know that's what it is, and mourns her lost baby. And that stolen child, that peasant kid, grows up believing they're royalty, never knowing their real mother died in childbirth in some filthy cottage, never knowing their entire identity is a lie. Tudor England, oh man, the Tudors were obsessed with heirs, specifically male heirs. Henry VIII went through 6 wives trying to get one, tore his country apart from Rome, executed anyone who got in his way. But what if, just what if, some of those failed pregnancies, those mysterious miscarriages and stillbirths, actually produced living children who were quickly swapped out because they weren't perfect? Anne Boleyn had multiple miscarriages after Elizabeth, including supposedly a deformed male fetus that might have contributed to Henry's decision to execute her. But pregnancy records from that era are suspiciously incomplete, gaps where there should be documentation, witnesses who suddenly can't recall details. It's almost like they were covering something up. And Elizabeth herself, Virgin Queen, never married, never produced an heir. Some historians whisper that maybe she couldn't, that maybe something about her own birth was off, that maybe the real daughter of Anne Boleyn and Henry died and Elizabeth was a substitute. It's far-fetched, sure, but when you're dealing with families this obsessed with bloodlines, this willing to murder and manipulate, nothing's off the table. The psychological damage this caused is something we don't talk about enough. Imagine being that swapped child, growing up royal, then somehow finding out the truth. It happened, had to have happened in some cases. Maybe a bitter servant spills the secret, maybe you overhear something you shouldn't. Your entire identity shatters. You're not divine, you're not chosen by God, you're a fraud, a placeholder, a living lie. Everything you've been taught about your sacred duty, your noble blood, it's all garbage. You're just a peasant's kid who got lucky or unlucky, depending on how you look at it. Some historians think this identity crisis might explain some of the erratic, unstable behavior of certain monarchs. The sudden paranoia, the irrational violence, the feeling that they don't really belong. If you secretly know or suspect you're not the real heir, every noble is a potential threat. Every whispered conversation could be plotting against you. Every mirror reflects an imposter. And the real heirs, the babies who were swapped out, what happened to them? Some died quickly, mercy or convenience. But others lived, hidden away in institutions, raised by peasants who didn't know what they had, maybe even surviving to adulthood, carrying genes and features that marked them as royal but living in total obscurity. There's documented cases of people showing up at courts claiming to be the real heir, providing details only the genuine article should know. Most were dismissed as con artists or lunatics, but some made the royals really nervous enough to imprison them, to make them disappear, to silence them permanently. Why go through all that trouble for an obvious fraud, unless they weren't frauds at all? The genetic science backs this up in disturbing ways. When researchers finally got permission to test royal remains, what they found was shocking. Genealogies that didn't match the official records, Y chromosomes that shouldn't be there, maternal DNA that came from nowhere. It's estimated that up to 15% of historical royal lineages have what they politely call non-paternity events, which is science speak for the daddy ain't who they said he was. But it's not just affairs and illegitimate kids. Some of these genetic discontinuities suggest wholesale replacement. Babies swapped so completely that entire branches of family trees are fiction. The Holy Roman Empire, that sprawling mess of kingdoms and principalities, they had baby swapping down to a science. With so many noble houses intermarrying, producing heirs who were basically genetic disasters, and needing to maintain complex political alliances, the temptation to cheat the system was irresistible. Records from Germanic states mention substitute children with suspicious frequency, couched in careful language, but the meaning's clear if you know what you're looking for. One particularly nasty account from Bavaria talks about a duchess who gave birth to what they called a monster. A baby so deformed the midwives couldn't even describe it without using religious language, calling it cursed or demon-touched. The official record says the baby died within hours, but a marginalia note, scribbled by someone who was there, mentions a washerwoman's infant who disappeared the same night and was never seen again. Connect those dots. That washerwoman's baby probably lived a life of luxury while her real child died in a ditch somewhere, and the fake heir had no clue they were ruling lands that weren't rightfully theirs. The Catholic Church, man, they were neck-deep in this. They had to be. Baptismal records, birth certificates, official documentation, all of it flowed through church officials, and the church benefited enormously from keeping monarchies stable. Unstable kingdoms meant chaos. Chaos meant less power and money for Rome. So when a royal family needed a birth certificate fudged, needed witnesses to swear they saw a healthy baby when they didn't, needed a deformed infant buried quickly and quietly without questions, the church made it happen. Priests took confessions from dying midwives and took those secrets to their graves. Monasteries provided convenient hiding places for special, royal children who couldn't be seen in public. And conveniently, fires would break out in record rooms, destroying evidence right when some scholar started asking uncomfortable questions. Coincidence? Not likely. What really makes my blood run cold is thinking about the mothers, both of them in these scenarios. The royal mother who just endured hours of agonizing labor, who's pumped full of whatever passed for pain medication in those days, opium probably, who's bleeding and exhausted and maybe dying herself, and they take her baby away before she can really look at it, really hold it, and bring her back some other infant. Does she know? Can she tell? Does some primal instinct scream at her that this isn't her child? Or is she too drugged, too weak, too indoctrinated to trust her own feelings over what the physicians and priests tell her? And the peasant mother, waking up to find her baby gone or replaced, knowing in her heart something terrible happened, but living in a world where her voice means nothing, where accusing nobles of anything gets you tortured or killed. The grief, the rage, the helplessness. Some probably went insane. Some probably killed themselves. And nobody recorded their pain, their stories, because they didn't matter. They were just collateral damage in the grand Game of Thrones. This practice, this horrific practice, continued way longer than you'd think. Even into the 1800s, even when medicine was getting better, when Enlightenment ideas about human rights were spreading, royal families were still playing these games. Because the stakes were just as high, maybe higher. As nationalism grew, as people started questioning divine right and demanding constitutional reforms, having the wrong heir, a weak heir, a visibly defective heir could spark revolution. Look at the fall of monarchies across Europe in the 19th and 20th centuries. How many of those collapses were hastened by rumors about illegitimacy, about tainted bloodlines, about heirs who weren't really heirs? The Russian Revolution didn't just happen because of economic inequality. There were deep suspicions about the imperial family's fitness to rule, about Alexei's hemophilia being God's judgment, about Alexandra's desperation making her vulnerable to charlatans like Rasputin. And here's the really messed up part. Some of those swapped babies probably would have been better rulers than the legitimate heirs they replaced. Peasant kids, raised royal, learning statecraft and politics without the genetic and mental baggage of inbreeding. Some of history's most effective monarchs might have been frauds, might have been common-born children who brought fresh blood, literally, into diseased dynasties. But we'll never know for sure. The evidence was destroyed too thoroughly, the lies maintained too carefully. What we have are fragments, hints, whispered stories that got written down by brave or foolish chroniclers who risked everything to preserve some scrap of truth. We have genetic anomalies that suggest the official story is wrong. We have way too many warming pan baby type conspiracies across too many different kingdoms for them all to be baseless paranoia. The legacy of these swaps is still with us. Modern royal families, the few that remain, are obsessed with genetic testing now, with proving their lineages are legitimate. Why? Because they know the history, they know what their ancestors did, and they're terrified someone will prove the current crop of royals are descended from peasant stock, that their claim to thrones and titles is built on a lie. And maybe, just maybe, that's exactly how it should be. Because if anything, these stories prove that blood doesn't make you noble, crowns don't make you worthy, and sometimes the best king is the one who started life in a cottage, not a palace. The peasant babies who got swapped in, they didn't ask for it, didn't choose it, but they lived those royal lives, made those royal decisions, and history remembers them as legitimate whether they were or not. So next time you see some documentary about royal bloodlines, about the divine right of kings, about noble heritage and pure lineages, remember this: it's probably fiction. Beautiful, elaborate, carefully maintained fiction. The truth is messier, darker, more human. The truth is that crowns have always sat on heads that maybe shouldn't wear them, that dynasties are built on secrets and lies, and that somewhere in your ancestry, if you go back far enough, you might just have a drop of royal blood that got there through the darkest swap of all. Sweet dreams.